What's up? Peace and love to everybody. Right now, we are dealing with an epidemic, the fentanyl epidemic. And you look at the situation, you have a drug that is basically a poisonous substance. It's a poison, and it's being cut into every single one of the common drugs that many people do. So, when I was in school, I sat through the whole lecture. They give you a class about drugs. Be careful about drugs. And they talk about the gateway drug. They talk to you about marijuana. There's usually some sort of a video with a cartoon of a joint with a face. And you see the other drugs that the joint leads to. It's the magic gateway drug. And as I grew older, sadly, I found out that that was fatally wrong. It's not marijuana that was the gateway drug. It is alcohol that is the gateway drug. And it is alcohol that is in almost every level of our society. So if you're a cop, at the end of your week, you go out and have some drinks with the boys. Whether you work in the film industry, you go out and you have some drinks with the boys, or if you're a longshoreman, or if you're a lawyer, or if you're an accountant, or if you're a football player, or if you're a basketball player, at every level of our society, alcohol's there for an adult. And oftentimes, if you're the person in a situation, particularly in the professional circles, business, that doesn't want to have a drink, it's like, whoa, what's wrong with this person? But nevertheless, alcohol is a staple of our society. And in a city like this, Vancouver, where I am now, that staple, alcohol, is often accompanied by other drugs. And when I say other drugs, I'm not talking about marijuana. I'm talking about things like cocaine, things like ecstasy, and the list goes on and on and on. But as time goes on, at least in my time as an adult, let's say the last 10 years, what I've seen is that oftentimes drugs like ecstasy or drugs like cocaine, especially for young adults, but I think it's common for all adults that these drugs come with the alcohol, and it is a part of our society. You look at major things that keep the city going, like the restaurant industry, the entertainment industry. These are places where the transportation industry, these are places where you're going to find cocaine, ecstasy. Look, I don't consider myself to be one that rolls in a circle of people that are active drug users. But the fact of the matter is, like most people, I know a lot of people that use a lot of these drugs, and they are normal people, or quote unquote, not the typical type of homeless drug user that you would imagine. These are your everyday working professional people that on their weekend or on their vacation, this is what they do. And it's what a lot of people do. And it's become very common that it's almost normal, especially in Vancouver. It's the party life, it's big, and with young people, more often than not, this is what happens. Now, me, as I said, someone who doesn't consider myself to be part of any kind of drug circle, this year, I've had three people close to me. One just last week, so let's say in the last 12 months, three people, including last week, that have passed away overdosing on fentanyl. Very tiny quantities of fentanyl, but enough to kill them. So this has really got my attention. And when you look at the statistics, I'm not going to sit here and throw a bunch of bullshit statistics at you, but in 2016 in this city alone, basically 1,000 people died from overdosing on fentanyl. There's 365 days in a year, so you do the math on how many people that is a day. And what I've observed is a lot of these people are young people, and more, a lot of these people may not be your everyday run-of-the-mill drug user that our society wants to just ignore and forget and treat the downtown east side like a tourist attraction and just forget about these different drug users. But what you're seeing is people who we would call quote unquote normal that are now starting to die from overdosing because this fentanyl is being laced into drugs that your average person in this city has done or maybe does do. So this is a crisis of the largest proportion, and it needs to be looked at. So, crisis versus genocide. This video is called The Genocide. Why is it a genocide? Well, let's have a closer look at this. When you talk about this, I mentioned this to somebody, you know, we got a crisis going on in the city, the fentanyl crisis, you know what I mean, and it seems like a genocide. And this person said, oh, you know, there's not going to be many drug users left if it keeps going at this rate. You know, this is great. It's going to, you know, and that's bullshit. That's bullshit. Because where does this come from? Where does this drug come from? It just magically appeared here in the last 2 years. Well, I know this. The first time I ever heard about it was in a hospital. And I saw it be prescribed to somebody for pain. So a lot of times what happens? Well, your average person, maybe working, middle class, high class, whatever class kind of person you want to look at, has an injury, ends up at the hospital, ends up getting prescribed one of these drugs. And now look what's happening. And so just because it's being prescribed at a hospital, that does not mean I can say it's a genocide. Why am I saying it's a genocide? Well, look at what's going on. Look at where initially and probably predominantly where is this crisis taking place? Well, I would say it's definitely taking place in the downtown east side. And I know it's definitely taking place in the Wally Ring area, sir, which is two of the largest concentrations of drug users maybe on the freaking planet. But there's also another thing about those two neighborhoods. They're also going under a massive development. You look at the city of Vancouver, look at how property prices have gone up. Well, the last little target is the downtown east side. Once all the crackheads are dead, you could start gentrifying that spot and you could put condos down there, sell those things for $2 million a pop, and bam. And that's what they're doing. That's why it's a genocide. Because it's very obvious when you see that 1,000 people can die in a year from a drug. How is that something that drug dealers are capitalizing off of? No drug dealer in the world is going to capitalize off of dead customers. No drug dealer in the world is going to capitalize when you're trying to sell one thing, but your customers are scared that it's got fentanyl in it because it probably does. When initially you're not trying to sell fentanyl, you're just trying to sell this or that, but it's cut into everything. And who's cutting it into everything? Well, no one knows. Oh, it's coming from China. You hear all these bullshit answers to these very important questions. But one thing we know is more and more people are dying, and especially in areas that are extremely valuable to development. So that's what's going on. And I think that right now, I don't know how many people it's going to take to die, but this is a crisis of the highest proportions. And my heart goes out to anybody who's also lost somebody close to them. And I feel obliged to talk blatantly about the reality of drug use with young people. The reality is a lot of young people, I'm 27, and maybe a lot of older people too, are going to use cocaine. That's the way it is. People go out to the club, people want to do a couple bumps. People a Friday night, that's part of the culture of the city. But it's at a point right now where it's Russian roulette. So you could just be trying to do your innocent Friday night routine, and maybe whatever drugs that you would incorporate into your Friday night routine now mean you're playing Russian roulette with your life. Bottom line. Point blank. So I would urge everybody and anybody, at least for now, to do whatever it takes to stay the hell away from any of these drugs. And I would also urge everybody and anybody who's watching this to talk about it as much as you can with as many people as you can. Because the reality is, you look at different places around the world, for example, Portugal, where in Portugal, you can do drugs and it's not a crime. It's not considered a criminal offense. It's considered a health problem. So when someone has a drug problem, they're not dealing with the police, they're dealing with a doctor. They're dealing with treatment for those issues. Now, I don't think that's the sole solution, but I definitely think that if there was a controlled environment for people who are trying to do drugs, places like Insight and some sort of quality control going on, you definitely wouldn't see as many people dying. And at this point, when you got 1,000 people dying in a year from a drug, I mean, look at this. A couple years ago, there was an epidemic of something called swine flu. And God damn it, people were staying home from school. People didn't want to take public transit because, God, we might get swine flu and die, right? And I think, what, maybe like 10 people died in the province from swine flu. But you got 1,000 people that have died from this poison that is infiltrating every single drug that people would be using. So it's something that needs to be talked about, needs to be dealt with. As always, nothing but peace and love to everybody. I'm out. Till next time.